Okay, so I'd like to finish off this lecture with measuring the different types of employment. So it's our labor statistics. So once again, our labor stats is compiled by our Stats Canada, and our policymakers usually will keep an eye on our employment and unemployment numbers because it is a very important indicator of where the economy is and where it is going. So one thing to note, that the health of the economy, and I just want to give you this kind of causal relationship. Our economic engine in Canada relies mainly on households and household spending. I would say about 57% of Canada's GDP comes from consumer spending. Well, consumer spending relies mainly on one thing, and that is income. If you believe that there is going to be an interruption in your income, or that your income opportunities look grim, what we will start to notice as economists is households tend to cut back on their spending. And as soon as households cut back on their spending, then the economic engine in any country will start to slow down. And that is why, for a healthy economy, you need to make sure that the employment situation in any country is also healthy. Anytime there is high unemployment rate, you will tend to see consumer spending will tend to stall, and economic activity will stall, and GDP will decline, or it will slow down. So employment, the employment stats is one of those statistics that most economists and most financial people will keep an eye on to see what the economy, what the government's going to do. If the economy is going to slow down, if employment is going to slow down, what are our policymakers going to do? So here's just some of our labor statistics. Our labor force is defined as the number of people employed plus the number of people unemployed. Now, the only time so you got to remember, with any type of statistic, the real value of these statistics is how they are measured. So anything that the government cannot measure does not show up in this measurement. So the number of people unemployed in Canada really is, the government will only know if you're unemployed if you're on employment insurance. Otherwise, if there's no way of measuring this statistic, the government will not know the true numbers of it. So that is the real value of any statistics, is whether it can be measured or not. Something that can't be measured falls, under the radar. Our participation rate is equal to our labor force divided by our working age population times 100. So anytime you see the word rate, you know that it's going to be times by 100, and it will show up as a percentage. So by definition, the working age population is the portion of the civilian non-institutionalized population of age 15 years and over. So non-institutionalized population means that these are people, the institutionalized individuals are people that are in jail and in lunatic asylums. So people that are in jail is not part of the working age population. Now, the working age population includes people that are not in the labor force. So in Canada, I'd say about 10, 15 years ago, they changed the definition of working age population. In the past, the working age population was defined as people between the age of 15 to 65 But after, I think in about, like I say, 10, 15 years ago, they changed the definition of working age population because they got rid of mandatory retirement. So now, if you're 70 years old, you are still part of the working age population because in Canada, there is no mandatory retirement. So let's just move on here. Our unemployment rate is equal to the number of unemployed people divided by our labor force times 100. There is something that the government factors in as your involuntary part-time rate, and your involuntary part-time rate is the number of workers wanting full-time work, but not getting full-time hours. However, people in this situation is not counted as unemployed. So that is your formula down below. The last classification of workers or laborers in Canada would be something called your discouraged workers. Discouraged workers are people that have left the labor force, not because they want to, but because they have given up looking for work because economic conditions are so grim and so depressing that they have not been able to find work, so they just leave the labor force. And usually, I would say most people in that situation end up on welfare because they run out of EI, and they haven't been able to find work, and they haven't been able to get any kind of income support. So eventually, the next step is usually welfare. Now, let's go through the different types of employment, because not all employment is equal. Sometimes we have something called good unemployment, and there's sometimes called really, really bad unemployment. So the typical unemployment that we see is something called cyclical unemployment. So cyclical unemployment is unemployment that is caused by a reduction in economic activity. So when the economy moves into a recession, you would expect people to lose their jobs because households aren't spending as much. When households don't spend as much, demand goes down. And when demand goes down, firms don't need to produce as much output. And when firms don't need to produce as much output, they don't need to hire as much labor. So that is called cyclical unemployment, and it's called cyclical because it's related to business cycles of economic growth, economic decline, economic growth, and economic decline. So that is your cyclical unemployment. Frictional unemployment is what we define as a good type of unemployment. So frictional unemployment usually is a case where people quit their current job to look for something better, something that is more suited to their skills. And usually we say that frictional unemployment, you tend to see more cases of frictional unemployment when times are good because the reason why you're willing to leave your old job to look for something better means that there are opportunities that are available. You don't tend to see you don't see higher cases of frictional unemployment when times are bad because people are going to keep their current job. Even though they're unhappy, they're still going to keep it because they don't think that they'll be able to find a better job at this time. The structural unemployment is a much bigger issue because you're dealing with unemployment that's due to 3 reasons. There's a change in demand for your job and the skill set that you have. So in where we see large cases of structural unemployment is when certain types of jobs have been replaced by automation. So, I mean, I think there are many cases where we see that. Bank tellers. You know, if you were a bank teller 20, 30 years ago, your job is going to be, is very different because most um, routine bank telling jobs now have been replaced by a cash machine that you can just do with your bank card, and you don't need to use the assistance of a real person. So I would say point A and point B are related. So point B is that that the job has been displaced by some technological advancement. And C, the other reason why job losses occur is because jobs are available in other parts of the country or world. So let's say if you were a geologist, um, you will tend to move around because once your project is done, if you were mining gold, and once that part of the project is done, it's finished and it's completed in this part of the country. Well, you might need to move somewhere else because now there's another property that needs your skills, but currently right now where you are, they don't have any need for you for your skill set, so you may have to move. The problem with structural unemployment is that it's usually, especially in cases of point A and point B, where where there's been a change in the demand for your skill set, and or your job has been replaced by a machine. Unfortunately, it requires people to be retrained, and that is a much more long-term problem. In Canada, another reason why people choose not to work is because of our employment insurance. The more generous our employment insurance schemes in Canada, the less likely people are motivated to work. Number 5, the last reason why people move in and out of employment is because of seasonal factors. And in Canada, there's a lot of jobs that are seasonal. We are still, very much dependent on natural resources, as are some of our industries. So fishing, logging, farming, mining, all those jobs tend to have a seasonal element because there's things that you cannot do all year round. So the seasonal unemployment, the stats when they calculate all these employment figures, will actually factor in a seasonal adjustment. So it's not another calculation. They already have a certain percentage that they allocate unemployment to have your seasonal adjustment. And the thing about seasonal unemployment is that it is relatively short term. If you are mining and you're mining for diamonds, well, you can't mine for diamonds in the summertime. You have to mine when the lakes are frozen. So that could only be like maybe 4 or 5 months where you are out of work, and you expect that once the lakes freeze over, that you will be back to work once again. So the last thing I want to talk about in terms of employment is the idea of something called full employment. Now, ideally, as any politician or any policymaker, we want the economy to be at full employment. That means that if people want to work, that they're able to find jobs, and they're able to be gainfully employed. So full employment does not mean a zero unemployment rate. In fact, full employment, there's many terms of full employment, and I'll name these right now. Full employment is sometimes called the natural rate of unemployment. The natural rate of unemployment is equal to the NAIRU, which is also known as the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. So that basically means that there is an ideal level of unemployment in our economy, so that unemployment does not mean zero unemployment. It doesn't mean that everybody is working. And the reason why it doesn't mean everybody is working is because you're still going to have frictional unemployment, structural unemployment. So when the economy is at full employment, the only unemployment that is equal to zero is cyclical. So remember that when we are at full employment, structural unemployment and frictional unemployment still exists. Seasonal unemployment exists, but remember that's already been factored in when our government calculates our employment rate. So I'll give you an example right now. Our last point here. The estimate of Canada's NAIRU for 2017 is 6.6%. So that means that if Canada's our current unemployment rate is equal to 6.6%, and let's say we're in 2017, that means that we are at full employment. If our current unemployment rate is at 8%, that means that we are in a situation where we have unemployment. And when we are below 6.6%, that means that we have too many people working. And that is actually not ideal as well. So when our unemployment rate is below our NAIRU, that will tend to cause inflation. That means that there's too many people working in jobs that they are not suited to do, which means that productivity will fall. When productivity falls, cost goes up, so that will attribute to inflation. Also, when you have too many people working, you have too many people incurring an income. That means you're going to have too many people spending money, and that will also tend to cause inflation. So I hope our first lecture of macroeconomics is, I hope it's relatively entertaining, and I didn't bore you too much with some of the details and with some of the terms. Once again, if you have any questions regarding any of these concepts, please come see me and ask me questions during my office hours.